This segment is called Elation and Deflation. We are elated to have Chris Peters joining us, but we received through Hockey Insider Chris Johnson some very, very difficult news, Marty, during the commercial break.
I don't want to say it.
Okay, I'll say it because I was pumping his tires for so long. I feel I'm taking this personally. Dakota Joshua, 4-year extension, $3.25 million in Vancouver, so he will not hit UFA status, and you can blame the Chicago Blackhawks all day long for making the cap space available for Vancouver to complete this transaction. What do you think?
I mean, it's an amazing deal for Vancouver because he obviously made an impact, and you need players like him. You obviously, and we're going to see that at the draft this week as well, that players that help you win hockey games,
yes.
Size, compete, heaviness, he does it all.
But he's also a fascinating prospect, now established pro. And a great reminder of what happens this weekend is a long ways from what may happen in somebody's career. He took the long road.
He really did.
To becoming a relative impact player for the Vancouver Canucks.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think patience is always important, especially with players that play the way that he does, because it takes him a little while to find their game and find their game against pros. I mean, he was an excellent college player, really did a lot of things that said this is going to be a pro prospect. And throughout his career, it took him a little while to figure it out as an NHL player. But honestly, I think you look at what he did this season, and that's what you would always hope for. That's the best case scenario.
It really was.
And now you have him for long term.
Yeah, good for Dakota Joshua. Big piece for Vancouver moving forward, surrounded by some talent, elite talent that actually loved playing with him too, and that's the fit, right?
I haven't said anything in the last 3 minutes because I'm still tongue-tied on the whole thing. Like 3.25, the guy scored 18, will probably score 25 a year.
Yeah, how many he got in the playoffs?
He got 4 in the playoffs in 13 games. He had 8 points, but still, his contribution is beyond the points, and $3.25 million is nothing in this NHL at 3.25.
Not when the cap's going up by $100 million, right?
All right, Chris, number 11, the Sabres.
Are we moving on already?
We got to get over. Okay. Where could we find Dakota Joshua at 11 for the Sabres?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, there's a great question, but I mean, seriously, what we know now, what Dakota Joshua can do, and that's typically not a first-round pick, right? But what kind of intangibles do you see in a player like that, and is there anybody in the range where Buffalo is sitting here at 11?
I mean, in this draft, there's a lot of really high-end options. I think really even at 11, you're still talking about some of the top tier of this class, because I think really the first 14 players, maybe 13 players, there's a pretty good level there, and then there's the drop-off. So you're still looking for that more premium, high-upside talent that is going to be there. And I think you're going to have defensemen, which obviously the Sabres have a lot of, but there are some right-shot defensemen, which they don't have as much of. And then there's also the centers that are a little bit on the undersized side. Berkeley Catton might be there. Maybe you're lucky and Tij Iginla falls there as a winger. I doubt it, but it's still possible. And then you also have Consta Helenius, who is a good two-way guy, and he's one of those guys that I do think has some of the intangible because he's got a great work ethic. He plays a heavy game, even though he's 5'11". He's really strong. He was one of the top scorers among U18 players in the last 30 years in Liga. So the list of guys that are ahead of him are all in the NHL. So you figure that player profiles as an NHL talent. And honestly, those are the types of guys that you'd be chasing, and that's why the pick has so much value as well. As we've certainly talked about the possibility of that being a trade asset to go out and get somebody that provides more immediate help. But I still think if you're getting a player in that range, he's going to be at the top, towards the top of your prospect system, which is already really well put together, and there's a lot of guys. But the one thing that I will say that's a little challenging, there's a lot of what the Sabres already have there too. When we talk about guys like Berkeley Catton and Consta Helenius, you probably want to find somebody with a little more size, but I just don't know if that's there for them.
Okay, so you mentioned Tij Iginla. Yep. If the Flames weren't picking 9th, and let's say the Flames were picking 16th, would Tij Iginla be more of a 13, 14, 15 type of prospect? But because it's 9th, and they're like, there's no way the Flames are going to pass, on Tij Iginla because of his dad, Jerome Iginla, and his success with the Flames. now all of a sudden he becomes like, hey, he's a top 9, he's a top 10. Maybe somebody is going to sneak him out at 7th or whatnot. Is that why, or is he a top 10 player?
I think it really flipped in the second half of the season, and also after the World Under-18 Championship, where he was so impactful for Canada in a gold medal effort. And he did kind of float into that territory where some teams might have him even higher than 9th. Some teams might have him. The range, we talk a lot about the uncertainty of this draft, which I think is the real fascinating thing. I think 1 will go as we all expect. 2 is a little bit, it's probably going to be Artem Levshinov, I would say.
Yep.
But then after that, what is Anaheim going to do? And so it creates this kind of cascading effect where, you're really not sure what's going to be there. And the gap between those players, I really feel, is not that big. So, like, the gap between a Tij Iginla and one of the top defensemen is pretty small. Okay. And so I do think that he belongs in the conversation. He was a little lower on my board than 9th. I do think that, the centers, Lindstrom, Catton, Hellenius, there's also the rise of Beckett Seneca, who's another, growing wing that I think is really fascinating, that has a lot of teams excited. It creates that kind of uncertainty at the top. So I'm really fascinated to see what's going to happen, because anything is possible. And the interesting thing is the value of that pick is going to dramatically change for some teams beneath the Sabres, right? It's like, hey, this guy's still there. Maybe we got to, throw something at him to get that pick.
Well, that's the thing. That's actually, I feel, incredibly linked to Kevin Adams' commentary recently. Have you not got that sense from Kevin that if anything is to happen at this draft with that pick, it's they may move back?
Yeah.
I've kind of sensed that in the tone, and that's exactly what you're
because
talking
they think
about.
they get a good player at 25 if
right.
they did,
Yeah.
and they would move off of 11.
And
He
it's
did say that
and it's what else
today.
can help you now.
Yeah.
And if it's not immediate, then it's like, well, let's do a 2-for-1. Let's get ourselves in a position to move back, get an extra pick out of it, and again, whether it's take a gamble. Nobody likes to say that, but I mean, based on the prospect pool that you've outlined, we've outlined, I mean, they have a lot of pieces in place. So,
but let me, because we talked about Dakota Joshua, and we went to dinner yesterday, and a couple tables over was Sacha Boisvert.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying he's not an 11th overall pick, but he's a little bigger, a little stronger, scored over 30 goals in the USHL, going to North Dakota, gotten a few fights.
Yep.
He's got that side. Like, could he be a 22nd overall pick? Is that too far? If the Sabres were to move back?
Yeah, no, I think that is a pretty fair range for Sacha, and he could go a little bit higher. It's the jumble of the draft, but as a 6'2" center with 30 goals scored in the USHL, which is a lot tougher than I think a lot of people realize to do that in that league.
He was 17 years old.
17 years old, and a guy that's still, he is bigger with the 6'2" frame, but he's got a lot of room to fill out. And he did have that little bit of snarl in his game. He had that little bit of kind of which I don't think people saw in his first season in the USHL. It's really hard to do that in the USHL, but the thing is there are players that probably better fit the system that could be available lower in terms of maybe fit needs better. Will you get the high-end potential? Possibly not. But at the same time, you're getting, you think about guys like Sacha Boisvert, Cole Beaudoin in that same range. Those are players that kind of give you that middle of the lineup jam that you probably need a little bit more of.
So we're being reminded of your mock draft.
Yes.
Would you like to indulge the audience as to what you think exactly will land with Buffalo at 11?
That's the thing is like the confusion of what's going to happen. I mean, I put Zane Parekh there because of the right shot defenseman. It gives you a little more balance.
Saginaw,
gives you a little more.
Right?
He's
Saginaw,
a right
champion.
Saginaw.
That's champion, and that's our hockey expert, our draft expert from Joywave.
Daniel.
Daniel. Oh, nice. Yeah.
He said Zane Parekh. He said Ziv Bouillon or Zane Parekh. So
yeah. And I mean, I think the chatter is that Ziv Bouillon's probably going to go earlier than maybe a lot of people expect. Parekh is the one that could potentially slide a little bit more. He had 96 points in the OHL before. As a defenseman, he's a goal scorer from the back end as well. So,
we love to see that.
Yeah. Who doesn't love that?
Well, some teams obviously because they don't have defensemen that think shoot to score, and we love seeing the shoot to score defenseman.
And he gets into the play. He gives you almost a fourth forward on the ice. He defends well enough. Like it's not like a huge. Is he great? No, but is he like defensively not compared to some of the other guys? Mm-hmm. But he's good enough, and I think that the thing is with the Sabres, you've got all those left shot defensemen. And there are similarities. Obviously, you have Biron now. You have different players. Obviously Rasmus Dahlin, very offensive-minded. And to have a player like Parekh in that mix, maybe it's a little too much of the same thing, but I still think that having some right shot balance to a decor and also a position of value is really important to have. The scarcity of right shot defensemen right now is really a thing. How much value do those guys get in the trade market? How much value do they bring in free agency to themselves, really, more than anybody? But
Sure.
That's the thing, is that I think that he's an interesting player, and I think there should be a forward there.
But because we're in Vegas and there's
Yeah.
always you play the slot machine and you want the wild, right? The wild to pop up everywhere. One guy that I think could be a wild card, and I don't know where you feel about him, is Cole Eiserman.
Yeah.
And I think maybe 11th is a little too early to take that shot on him, but he could be a 40-goal scorer in the NHL. He's got that goal-scoring ability that nobody else has.
Yeah.
There's a lot of deficiency in his game, but could you see him be in the 10 to 15 range?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. The chatter has been that he's obviously tumbled, throughout the season. He came into the year having scored almost 70 goals last season. Everybody's saying, hey, this is a guy that's going to be, a top-tier talent in this draft. The thing was, we didn't see a lot of progression in the game. We didn't see a lot of the things that he needed to add to be a more versatile player. And the thing is if you can't be versatile enough, how are you going to play the minutes that a top six forward needs to play? But the thing about Cole Eiserman, I think it's a boom-bust kind of pick, right? Because if you get him and he does have that goal-scoring talent, he's a 40-goal scorer, then all of a sudden you're talking about a guy that is going to be a star in the NHL. The opposite side is if the goals don't come the way that they did in junior and they don't come in the way, what else can he do for you? It was the same conversation with Cole Caulfield, but I think Cole Caulfield still had the hockey sense advantage where he was able to kind of do those things, and he's a little bit smaller. And if Cole was 6'2", I bet we wouldn't be having this conversation because at least there's that size element, but he's 5'11", so it's kind of like the thing that teams are still saying. And again, if you're the Sabres and you're looking at that player, you're saying, okay, we've got Zach Benson, we've got Matt Savoy. And again, I don't think you make those decisions with who you have. You just say who's the best player, and we'll take care of the rest later.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of that redundancy, I guess.
We got to fly, but I want to leave you with this question. What do the Sabres have in their new AHL head coach in Michael Leone?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that because I love Mike Leone. I think that, for one, he's a great developer of talent. He's a person first ahead of the player, which I think is really important. He's, he played for John Cooper as a junior player way back in the day in the North American League. And you kind of see those similar elements of, taking care of his players. And, Artem Levshinov, who's going to probably go second overall, played for him last year, and I think he really flourished in his first year in North America. And that's a player you had to make comfortable, didn't speak much English, was adjusting to a new culture, was away from home. And, they were able to make him better. And I think that that's really, really special. So I have a lot of time for Mike. I think that he's a great, person first, and then really develops well. And he's an innovative thinker too, which I think is really important for today's NHL. And I think that's what he's going to bring. And I thought that was a great hire at the time. I still think it's a great hire. Really excited to see how he does. Obviously, the Amerks have had some great success with a lot of coaches that I've known over the years.
Sure.
So nobody's called me to be an assistant coach yet, though. So I don't know what I got to do.
We got to wait until July 1. There's a new fiscal year after July 1.
Okay.
So.
Hey, keep up the great
Yeah,
work.
thanks a lot.
Phenomenal to see you.
Hey.
Terrific
Yeah,
insight as
great to see you.
always. And
Great work, and as always with FloHockey and everything.
Quick plug for where people can find all of your stuff.
Yeah, we'll have live draft analysis on FloHockey.tv, all pick by pick, and also draft grades and all those things. So
awesome.
Lots coming on FloHockey.tv.